Yes. All right, Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15. I know it's been a full morning for you all. We're going through a series called Be Thankful. And last week we looked at the lady who was caught in the act of adultery, and she was thankful because instead of judgment, she received mercy. And today is kind of a different twist on a thankful message. I've never preached in this kind of a topic before, as far as being thankful. But the father of the prodigal was thankful. And in this story, the father of the prodigal is God. Jesus is telling a parable about his father, and he's likening it to the son. So the son is kind of like humanity, okay? And the prodigal's father is like God the Father. And Jesus is telling this story. And I have a lot to talk about, but I'm going to try to condense it down because Blondie's is waiting for me. I'm sorry. Anyway, so when Jesus is telling a parable, it's really interesting to know who is he talking to, right? That's a good question, right? Who's he talking to? Well, in Luke chapter 15 and verse 1, it gives us who his crowd is, okay? So this is who his crowd is. In verse 1, it says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus." All right, so two people there. So far we know in the crowd that there's tax collectors and sinners. All right?
Maybe it's the same guy.
Might be the same guy. Good question. Verse 2, "But the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" So who else is in the crowd? The Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Now Jesus is getting ready to unload on them in a form of a parable. Now he's not going to be yelling at them, pointing his finger, getting all angry with them. But the content in which he shares in this story about the parable of the lost son, when they listen and hear some of the stuff Jesus is going to say, it's literally going to be earth-shattering to them. So let's get into this, all right? This is an interesting fact. When the great American storyteller Mark Twain was asked, "Who do you think is the best storyteller who ever lived?" Mark Twain answered, "Jesus Christ." And then he was asked, "And which story is the greatest story ever told?" He replied, "The story of the prodigal son." So this is the story of the prodigal son. Starting with verse 11, Jesus continued. So he's talking to this group of people that we already established. He already told them a parable about the lost sheep and about the lost coin, and now he takes it to the lost son. Jesus continued, verse 11, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." The first thing I want to look at is this rebellious demand. This rebellious demand. Look at verse 12. It says, "The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share.'" Now the Pharisees, if you were in the crowd, you would hear them gasp about now. They'd be like, "Oh, what in the world? What's going to happen next?" Because in this culture, a child did not respect his father by coming to them and demanding their inheritance. I mean, that's kind of like saying, "Can you hurry up and die?" The father typically would respond by slapping the son across the face as a sign of refusal and shame. The son was saying, pretty much, he was simply saying, "I want my inheritance," except the word inheritance wasn't used. He was saying, "I want the portion of goods that you owe me. Come on, old man, give it up." Very disrespectful. See, if he would have said, "Father, I want my inheritance," what he would have been saying is this. He would have been saying, "Dad, I feel like I'm old enough, and I know you're getting older, and I want to do such a good job at continuing the family business that I want to start working right alongside of you. I want to start walking right alongside of you. I want to see how the business is done. I want to see how the stuff in the back is done. I want to know everything about this business so I can take it over and do a good job and even better than what you did. That's what I want to do, Dad. That's what you're referring to when you say I want an inheritance." But that's not what he was saying. He was saying this. He's like, "Dad, just give me what I want. You don't even have to be a part of it. I just want what's owed me. I want to be done with you. I want to be gone. I don't want to live here anymore." The rebellious demand. Do you know when we choose to live life on our own apart from God, we're saying, God, just give me the good stuff. Give me the good air to breathe. Give me my health. Give me my ability to work. Give me the beauty of this world. Give me everything I need. And by the way, just leave me alone. We have all these expectancies in life, and often we fail to remember where all this good stuff comes from. So, what was the father's response? The Pharisees thought that what? Man, okay, this son's, he's due a good slapping. What did the father do? Look at the rest of verse 12. It says, Father, give me my share of the estate. What does this say? So he divided his property between them. The son, and then there was the older son, and there was this boy who was the prodigal, and then there was the father. So the father said, all right. And so he divided the property between them. That was the father's response. He gave them what they asked for. The father is willing to endure the agony of rejected love. That's what Jesus was teaching here. See, this is free will. What if God created us just as people who said yes to Jesus whenever he said jump? What if that was our creation and we had no other choice? How could we then love him out of a motive of love versus a motive of just being created to love, like a robotic way? So Jesus is teaching here free will. The Father responds to us like this. Jesus is teaching us that even at the grief of the Father, he still permits us to make the choices that we make. Some of the questions that we ask about humanity is, God, why in the world do you permit things to happen? The evil atrocities, all the bad things that are going on. It's like, why is this happening? How is this, why do you permit this to happen? It's because of free will. If God controlled every single thing, then humanity would have no choice. And if there's no choice, then there's no love motivated out of, a desire to love God. It would destroy all of that, wouldn't it? So even at the expense of the Father's heart, he allows us to do what we want to do, even though it grieves him. That's the Father's response. Look at verses 13 through 17, though. Let's look at the son's journey. Not long after that, property is divided up. Maybe he sells it, has a pocket full of money. Verse 13, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. Squandered his wealth in wild living. Well, the Bible says in verse 13, first of all, where did he go? He went to a far country. He went to a distant land. It was somewhere other than where he was. Have you ever had a dream of just getting away from where you are? You know what I mean? It's like anywhere. I grew up in a small town, and I can hear people still talking. Anywhere is better than here. You know what I mean? Anywhere is better than here. You've heard it said. They just want to get out. They want to go. Well, this was this young man's desire. He just wanted to go, and so he did in verse 13. Well, so what did he do? Look at what else verse 13 says. He said he squandered his wealth in wild living. Verse 30 says that he wasted his money on prostitutes. He partied, he lived it up, and did whatever he wanted to do, and was doing whatever everyone around him was doing. He was probably so loaded that he had a lot of friends when he had a lot of money. You ever been in that world? So where did it take him? Look at verse 14. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country. And look at this. What does that say? He began to be in need. That's probably the first time he'd ever experienced the fact that he was in need. His father took such good care of him, always had food on the table, probably dressed in a really nice robe, and probably had a nice good-looking ring, probably a really big ring. Not an edible ring like I can afford. You know those big candy rings? Probably had a ring that actually had the real jewel on it, you know what I mean? Very wealthy, but this is interesting. It says, and he began to be in need. See, his desire to live a life apart from the Father did what to him? It took him to a place where there was a great famine. Now, I did some studying on what a famine was, and I mean, there's some horrific stories, especially a famine, the Irish famine in the 1800s. It got so bad that if you had to have like a knife for protection, because if you walked the streets, like you were like, people, I don't know if they're thinking, oh my goodness, there goes a deer, or there goes a cow, or a pig, or whatever. That's not nice, but you know what I mean. Maybe, humanity became edible because they got so hungry. In fact, they were eating palm trees, they were eating shoe leather. Got pretty bad. Well, this was This was where this young son was. Went from his father's table where he was eating beef and the best of the world to now living in a famine. So what did he do? Verse 16. Let's just read the rest of verse 15. It says, "So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs." Now, pigs aren't kosher. You understand that, right? And you're not allowed to eat pigs as a Jewish person. Okay, even today. But here it was still the Levitical law was in effect. So the Pharisees, remember who they're talking to here. The Pharisees, the sinners, the tax collectors. The Pharisees are like, "Man, your son went and started feeding hogs and pigs? What? That's horrific." And then look at verse 16. "He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything." So what happened? His walking away from the Father took him to a place of hunger, didn't it? It teaches us that sin will never satisfy for long. You will grow hungry. It's a powerful lesson. It took this boy to the lowest place possible, battling for food with the pigs. This was the lowliest. Can you imagine playing tug of war with a corn cob husk with a pig? Like, here, I want the rest of that. You know what I mean? What a place. I was thinking about this, and I want you to picture this. Maybe it was a cold night that he's out there in the evening. And maybe the Judean mountains were lined with snow. Maybe he started thinking, and a thought came to his mind, and so he begins to write. He's in a desperate place. And so he pins this thought that's roaming around in his mind. He says, "The snow glows white on the mountains tonight. Not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation. Looks like I'm the king. The wind is howling like the swirling storm inside. And maybe in his mind, he hears a voice that says, 'Let it go.' The pride that was keeping him. Let it go. The lust that gripped him. Let it go. The greed that controlled him. Let it go. The fear of going back to his father." You thought that was a new song, didn't you? Let it go. That's not in the Bible, folk. Okay? That was just a joke. But I liked it when I was reading that. It said a kingdom of isolation. He felt absolutely alone. And what was the stuff that was holding him? It was his pride. It was his greed. Maybe it was his fear of going back to the Father. But look at what verse 17 says. It says, when he came to his senses. I love that passage. When he came to his senses. See, sin had made him delusional. Sin will literally make you think that you can live life better than what the Father can provide you. Living a life that's senseless. Living a life that's passionate only about what you're thinking and it's your world and it's your kingdom and you set this up and it's all about what you want and you think you're living the dream only to find yourself literally in a pig's swallowing place. Not a good place to be. So what does good sense look like? I like this. So it says, verse 17, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? What was he saying? He's like, wow, I used to be the son. I'm willing to go back and even be, what? A hired servant. My dad took care of his hired servants way better than I'm being taken care of here. So a good sense is saying what? There's help at home. Some of us are wandered away too far from God right now. We are far from God, spiritually speaking. And there may be some that you know of a child that's far from God right now. And you're praying that God will get a hold of them. Let me tell you, the first thing you can recognize about someone who God has gotten a hold of is they recognize that where they're at is a problem and where they need to go, only God can provide. His first thing is like thinking about home. Good sense looks like there's help at home, spiritually speaking. There's help at my Father's house. Here I am dying and my Father has what my life needs. Good sense is saying, I can't do it apart from the Father. Good sense is taking your pride and your thoughts and laying them aside. Good sense is returning to God. So I love this. Look at the Son's plan. Verse 18. He says, I will set out and go back to the Father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. I love these verses, and I'll tell you why. He started rehearsing what he's going to say to the father. He's like, I got to get this right. What am I going to say? It's like he put this to memory. So we have one side of the story. If we had a huge canvas up here, maybe on one side I'm drawing in what a distant land looks like, and the son living wildly and sinfully, and then now he's in this pigsty. And so that's the one side of the canvas. What does the other side of the canvas look like? And that's number 4, the father's anticipation and forgiveness. Jump to verse 20. It says, so he got up and went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. Now, why did his father see him while he was a long way off? Yeah, he was looking for him. Now, that's a powerful, we got to get that. He was looking for him. The father's anticipation to see his son, to be reconciled back to his son. Now, when a son would do what this son did in the culture in which Jesus is teaching, they would have a big funeral. That son was classified as dead. When you did what this son did to his father, they would literally have a funeral with all the wailers and everything, maybe an empty casket, I don't know. But they would literally, that child would be dead to that father and to that family. This father desperately did not want his son to remain gone. And so every day he would look for his son with anticipation, with hope, with a desire that he would come home no matter what or where he had been. So the father's anticipation. The father was anticipating to bear his shame. I like this idea. It says, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son. Now, I was studying about that, and for the noblemen wore robes that literally went to the bottom of, like, you couldn't see their feet. And if they exposed any of their legs at all, it was a shame. It was an absolute shame. In fact, on Sunday, if a bird flew up underneath their skirt, they couldn't raise it up to get the bird out. So they'd be like, they had to wait till sundown on Saturday, where no one could see, for them to raise that up and say, "Shoo, bird." I'm telling you what, I'm not kidding around. That's true. So this is what the nobleman did. And Jesus is telling a story about what the nobleman did in the presence of noblemen like Pharisees. And this is what he did. He saw his son going, and he knew the crowd's response to the son as he's coming home. They were going to shame him, maybe throw rotten tomatoes at him and call out to him and say, "Look at what you've done to your dad. You are a pitiful mess, and you're a disgrace. What are you doing home? We wish you would have died." All these negative things were getting ready to be hurled on the son, and the father was looking. Why? And he says he had compassion. He was trying to spare his son the shame that was to come upon him. So what did he do? He raised up his dress, I don't know what you call it, robe, and took off running. In order for them to run, they had to raise the dress up, or the robe up. And in that moment, shame would come upon the father. Now, I just want you to understand something. The world was looking at the son, getting ready, looking at humanity, getting ready to persecute them, and the father says, "Hey, over here." And so the whole world then looks at the father, and they're like, "Wow, what you're doing is more shameful than what the son did." Therefore, taking the shame off of the son and making its application onto the father as he runs and embraces his son. The proper response was to shun the son. But that's not God's response. See, all of us represent, all of our story is in this story of the son. That's humanity's story. And all the angels in heaven and God in heaven, they could be yelling at us and saying, "I can't believe you forsook Christ. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You are pathetic. What are we even going to do with you?" But that's not what Scripture teaches, does it? The Bible literally says that Jesus became a curse for us. Now look at this verse. It's in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. It says, "Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame." See, we were responsible for all of our sins. We should have bore all that shame. We should have bore the curse of our, we should have paid for that with our very life. But what did Jesus do? He said, I will go to the cross. I will become the curse. I will become the shame for all of humanity. And so literally all the shame that was responsible and should laid on humanity was then laid on Christ at the cross. This is the lesson that Jesus is teaching us. So what happens? Well, the Bible says that he embraced his son. Look at that, verse 20. Threw his arms around him and kissed him. Do you know that God embraced humanity even though they were smelling like a pig? Smelling disgustingly. The Bible says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. I like this. Look at verses 18 through 19. You hear now the son's rehearsed lines, right? You have him here. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, the father came. Now watch this. Okay, so they're in an embrace. The father is kissing the son. Verse 21, the son said to him, here goes. This is what was rehearsed. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Maybe he's going to take a breath at this moment. And the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. What was left off of all that rehearsal, all of that part? What part was left off? Well, I have the answer right here in my notes. What did he say in verse 19? He said, make me like one of your hired servants. He didn't say that after he encountered the Father. Why? Jesus was teaching a very important lesson here. It's not how hard you work that gains you the Father's grace. It's you just coming to the Father. Now, I hope we get that. Because sometimes we try to clean our life up before we ever go to the Father. And what Jesus is teaching is that the Father doesn't care how bad you smell, how bad you are in your sinful life. If you'll come to the Father, He will hug you, He will forgive you, you will find restoration. It's not about how hard you work. It's about your willingness to say, I need to go to the Father for this. And I love this. I love it all, don't I? I keep saying that. I love this. Just one of my favorite things. The forgiveness was quick. I mean, they expected shunning, but look at this. From verse 20, where he's being kissed, the son says his thing. In verse 22, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. I thought of this. Why sandals on his feet? He didn't have sandals. What did he just go through? He just went through a huge drought. A famine where people were eating their shoe leather. I wonder if he had gotten so bad that he was literally physically eating his shoe leather. Pretty bad, huh? It said, bring out the robe, put it on a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. Now this is the key verse in the whole sermon. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So number 5, the thankful father. He said, let's throw the biggest party ever. Let's throw the biggest party ever. Let's get out the best stuff. This is the greatest day ever. Let's put the family ring on his finger and let him know that he's back in the family and back into the inheritance. Wow. He had been reconciled back to the Father and all was well. The story deals with humanity at different points in their life, doesn't it? All of us have rebelled against the Father, though. All have sinned. All of us have said, I want to do life my own. All of us have done that. And I hope all of us have recognized our need from that deep part of life where we were lonely, where we were without God. Hopefully we've all recognized our need of Jesus Christ and gotten up and said, I'm going home. I'm going back to the Father. Let's stand together this morning. Thanks for being so attentive.